Hi guys, welcome back to the Earthy Delights podcast. Today's guest is a former teacher of mine, my Spanish teacher, Miss Emma Albuixech. She's had a great influence on my life. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have studied at the school I studied, which is where I ultimately met Louisa, my girlfriend of 7 years now, and I wouldn't have gone to Leeds University. She recommended me to go there, which meant I wouldn't have probably moved to Madrid. So without Miss Albuquerque, my life would be very different right now. It was great to talk to her because we spoke about the pressures of being a teacher, how they manage their own mental health and the mental health of their students, how they cope with the different personality profiles of their students, and inspire their students, which I think can be easier said than done sometimes, especially when the children don't have an initial interest in that subject. We talk about what it means to nurture students and to help them be more than just an academic success. And it was really great to listen to a teacher's point of view. I think during coronavirus and the lockdown, we've all given a lot more appreciation towards teachers and understand how difficult their job is. And so to talk to her and be able to understand what it means to be a teacher and all that comes with it was a really great opportunity. And I hope you guys learned something from it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I certainly did. So without further ado, here is Miss Emma Albuixech. Miss Emma Albuixech. I'm gonna have to stop calling you Miss for the purpose of this podcast. But Miss Albuixech, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks, Seb. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. I'm looking forward to this conversation. It feels like it's been too long since I saw you last, but yet we keep on speaking over Facebook and everything else.
We
So it's
do,
good to
yeah.
finally kind of see you at least in video form. Anyway, for people who are listening, could you just give like a brief kind of description of how I know you, who you are, and why I'm doing this podcast with you today?
Okay, so I taught Seb Spanish at A level in school, but even before that, our paths had crossed at his previous school, which I had also been teaching at. So I think was that it? Did you actually come in year 7 or was it in year 8?
No, year 7, yeah.
Yeah,
So, but you left at GCSE, didn't you? I don't think I
yeah.
had you for
I'd
GCSE.
had enough of you by
Okay.
then. So I needed to leave. But yeah, do you know what? I found I was trawling through sort of doing reports because we don't do copy and paste of reports at all. But I was
Right.
trawling through my reports and I found my old report of you in year 8.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
What does it say? Didn't shut up. Concentrate more.
It was sort of, yeah, it was kind of so much ability, but plays the class clown, um, needs to realise his potential and
Yeah.
and all the rest of it, which I think you have done eventually. So there you
Eventually,
go.
I mean, it took a time. Yeah. What if in year 8 I was 12? It's taken 12 years to get there. But
Yeah,
hey, better let better late than never, I guess. Better late than never.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, no, yeah, it was really good. I said to you before we started this, but I was talking to Jim about you and about like the impact that a teacher has or can have, I should say, not necessarily they will always have on a student, but they can have on a student. And for people who don't really know like my past or how important or influential you were, to give people a bit of a quick backstory. Basically, like Miss said, you taught me from year 7 till 9, I believe, and then you
Mm,
left for my year 10 and 11, I think.
mm, mm,
And then by the time I finished my GCSEs at Skeg Grammar, the school had kind of gone downhill, and pretty much all of the best teachers had left in whatever department it was. There weren't many of the top teachers left. So my mum more than anything decided that I needed to leave. And so we did the rounds at Lincoln schools, and nothing really fit. And I mean, we're talking about maybe a week before I had to start A levels. And so I was like, right, well, I'm just going to head back to Skeg Grammar then because there's nothing else. And then one of my kind of family friends said that he went to Cars Grammar, and I asked him about the Spanish department, and he said, "Oh yeah, there's a woman who's like married to this Catalan, Miss Albuixech. She's really good. I have her for GCSE, this, that, and the other." And I was like, "Miss Albuixech, did you say?" And I had to make sure that it was the same woman. So I went and I checked Cars out, went for a visit, and basically the only thing I was interested in was going to check that it was you. So I went to the little Spanish part of the school, and alas, it was. And so then that was me. That was the deal. And I was like, right, well, that's it. I'm joining Cars then, I guess. And it really was like that. People think I'm over-egging it. And then further still, I remember when I was going for uni, I couldn't be bothered, as anyone who knows me, that doesn't surprise them, but I couldn't be bothered to do the open days. It was really just tedious and boring. And so we were just talking, I think, after one lesson, and I said,
Mm.
I think you asked me like what are my plans for uni, and I said I don't really know, can't be bothered to look around the unis, but I'm gonna have to choose somewhere. And then you said, oh well, if you're looking to study Spanish, I know Leeds have ploughed in a lot of money into their kind of languages department.
Mm.
And then for me, that was good enough. That was like the seal of approval. And I was like, right, well, if it's good enough for Miss Albuixech, I'll take it. And so I firmed there, having never even been to Leeds City ever before. And then I rocked up on the day that we started the uni. And then and that's it. And thank God I liked it, because if not, I think I might have haunted you. But yeah.
I've got a lot to answer for.
Yeah, but no, I absolutely loved it. And so it was that was all thanks to you. And obviously at Cars I met Louisa, who's been my girlfriend for 7 years now, and who I live with in Madrid. And actually it was during the trip that you organized in Barcelona for our exchange, where finally, after I think it was my third attempt, I finally managed to convince her that her best choice was to go out with me. So
I didn't realise you tried before.
Yeah. I tried before, and she turned me down a good few times. I was like, right, listen.
Can you remember? I used to say to you two, "Oh my God, you just bickering like an old married couple."
Yeah.
Sitting in the doctor's surgery, going at each other.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, not much has changed now, but but no, yeah. So in some very direct ways, and in some more kind of roundabout ways, you've had like a real impact on my life. And obviously now I'm living in Madrid, and like, I mean, you always try to ram Barcelona down our throats.
Yeah,
I think maybe
that was a big disappointment. You've disappointed me big time there.
I think there's a subconscious part of me that's like, yeah, I'm going to, just to spite Miss, I'm going to have to move to Madrid. Yeah. In fact, we had the opportunity to learn Catalan at uni as an extra module. And I was like, there's just not a chance in hell that I'm learning Catalan.
Why would I do that?
Over my dead body. Yeah, over my dead body. So here I am in Madrid, and it's all thanks to you, really. And I wanted to ask you, obviously when I was in year 7 and all the way through, I had a talent for Spanish, and that's pure. I mean, it's just luck. I was just having an Italian dad, so I'd always had that kind of Latin culture in me, and I spoke Italian. Obviously, Italian and Spanish are really similar, but I think especially in England, we have this culture where languages aren't seen as important, because the whole notion is, well, if I go abroad, I can just speak English anyway, so what's the point?
Yeah.
And that's even more so the case in Spain, actually, where they are quite accommodating, and they will help you out if they see that you can't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, like, whether you believe that you can actually, I don't know, if you can ignite a flame of interest in a kid who has no initial interest in a subject. I mean, like I said to you before, but Galileo says, you can't. He says you cannot teach a man anything. You can only help him find it within himself. So I think he thinks it's a lost cause. But I guess at the end of the day, it is your job to try to inspire 30 kids every year group to take it on as far as they can do. Do you think that's a possibility?
I think it's. It is difficult. It's obviously teaching languages it's not one of the easiest things, as you know, to learn a language, is it?
Yeah.
Not as easy as sort of learning geography or doing DT and stuff like that. And obviously sort of teaching in a boys' school as well, it's more the practical subjects that they were particularly more interested in. They come as well where we are. It's very rural, and I hate to say it, quite not very open to sort of cultural diversity and all the rest of it. I don't know if I can say that. But so the boys come almost conditioned, some of them, I think, with the fact that languages are really, really difficult. So, and it's going to be impossible to learn. And as you say, they're not going to need it in the future. So it's a question of, it's just a question of sort of little by little, those little steps, and trying to sort of instill in them that it's not just the fact of learning the language, it's the fact of learning the history, the culture. It's all about the cultural capital, the skills that a language, the skills that you gain learning a language, which can then be transferred onto other subjects like communication and like thinking out of the box and taking risks and all that kind of thing. And I think it's a question of praise, isn't it? You know, if somebody sort of says something in the class and it's not right, it's not like a question saying no, wrong. It's like, okay, that's a really good idea. Well done. Can you sort of refine that a little bit? What about if you think about this? What might it be? And then just sort of pushing them to think a little bit more themselves. So you're not going to hit everybody, no way. And I mean, that obviously shows the amount of people, you know, who take up languages at A level.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I can't remember how many were in our class, about 6, 7.
Yeah, something
maybe.
Like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the moment, I've got a year 13 group of 6 and a year 12 group of 5. So, you know, it's just not. It isn't everybody's cup of tea. It is very, very difficult, but you know, you try, and it's very hard as well in sort of the lower years, well, certainly in the GCSE years. You teach them to pass this exam, so you know, you're getting them to learn off by heart, to tell you about what they would do if they were the Minister of the Environment to improve the environment. How often do you communicate that with your mates in Spain, Seb? I mean,
exactly. Yeah,
it's just ridiculous. So, you know, the curriculum, what we have to teach, has got a lot to do with it. I think it needs to be much more communication based. But you try and push them. You try and give people praise, because they're scared. They're scared of making a fool of themselves and all the rest of it. So you just praise them and just, you know, and you make it more normal, that the fact that you make mistakes. So I always explain the mistakes that I've made.
I always remember Bocadillo de Polla.
Yeah.
I'll never forget.
Exactly.
Yeah.
and I teach that, and I always, with the year 7s, when they're saying how old they are, it's you know, and they'll say, tengo 11 años, and I'm like, you don't. I really don't want to know how many anuses you have. And that's sort of like, it's that kind of, I don't know, good fun, I suppose, aspect. Yeah.
It's something interesting, because I have some of my friends are trying to learn languages now, or I've got a lot of Spanish friends who try to speak English, or they want to learn or improve their English, or whatever the case may be. Or with Louisa, she's now trying to, obviously she let it slip because she stopped studying after A level, and now she's living in Madrid. She's having to repick it up again. My first thing that I always say is, you're going to commit errors. So like, you really just need to get that out of. Forget about it, because I was like, even in English, I mean, the amount of people who think they speak good English, and then actually, if you were to listen to them, well, that's wrong. That, you know, we was doing this. Well, okay, fine, whatever. But you know, so I was like, you if you're going to commit errors in your mother tongue, so to speak, I mean, forget about trying to speak perfectly in a foreign language. It's never going to happen. And I found as well, maybe it's just my thing, but I'm not sure if you agree, but I found with girls and women, that's more of a hang up.
Yes,
so I found, and I think, like with guys, I mean, me especially, but with guys, we're fairly cocky. And so I would do well in my speaking, because I would come at them with a pace and with a rhythm where actually it would like confuse the examiner to the point where they go, God, he's speaking really well. And then I think actually if they re-listen, if they re-listened back, they'd go, oh, that's an error, that's another error, here's a massive error, blah, blah. But because I would come at them with a confidence, I kind of bamboozled. Whereas I would listen to Louisa speak, or, you know, my mum tried to speak Italian and whatever, and they would only ever say a sentence if they knew it was perfect. Which meant that they only ever said the most simple sentences ever, or they never really spoke it either. So then you don't get the practice in. And I always try to like say that to my friends who are learning a foreign language, forget about the errors. You've just got to go in there full force. And if you make 10 errors a sentence, it is what it is. But eventually you'll learn, and you'll make fewer, but you'll always make some. That's like, my dad's been in England for 30 years. He speaks better English than most English people, but he still says ruin instead of ruin. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's accents or whatever it is that you'll never change that. And I think if people could get over that hang up, that would make a massive difference in learning and having the appetite to speak actually as well.
Yeah. And also if it were about communication, it were about things that you actually need. And I think the A-level syllabus is pretty good. The A-level syllabus is right where it should be. I think it's the Key Stage 3 syllabus now, you've got a bit more freedom, but obviously it's got to be geared towards the GCSE one. The GCSE one is just rubbish. It is just,
You're jumping through hoops.
Yeah, you are jumping through hoops.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it became obvious as well because you could memorize what you were going to say in your speaking and even your writing. You could even though I was good at Spanish, I would just learn it word for word, and then I would just like basically recite it afterwards or write it down word for word exactly how I memorized it. But it was kind of funny because then in A level, I'm not going to out my friends here, but then in A level, so we'd all come into A level with like A's or A stars, and then we come into A level, and then everyone in the class was basically at a C or a B level. Except me, and I was only saved by my speaking because, to be honest, my writing was a C level. My writing has never been my strong point, and that I think that does a real like kind of disservice to students because then they believe, oh, I got an A star in Spanish, yeah, because if you get an A star at GCSE, you probably should take it on for A level, really, and then they take it on for A level, expecting to probably end up with a B or an A, which then, as a language, B or A on your UCAS or whatever, that looks amazing. Going to get you to some really good unis, and then they come unstuck, and then it's like, oh shit, this is a lot harder than what I thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean the GCSE that you did, it's changed since then, and it's no longer the the controlled assessment sort of essay thing that you wrote. It is more sort of a proper written. Well, it's actually a written exam. And the speaking is, they do want you to be more spontaneous. So before lockdown, I was sort of practicing, sort of various stuff with my year 11s, and we did mock exams, and they were like, oh, I haven't learned it. I just said, doesn't matter. Just like, let's just have this conversation, just see how far you can go. And actually, I felt that the more spontaneity that they were able to give me was actually better than had it been pre-learned. If it had been pre-learned, they would have just completely dried up because they couldn't remember it. And the way sort of it was when they were doing it more spontaneously, they could sort of drag in just different verbs, different ideas from all kinds of contexts. And so it did work much better that way. And I think, that's what a language is about. It's about communicating spontaneously, isn't it? So
yeah, for sure. I wondered, now that you teach it, how do I put this? Obviously, you're teaching it to students at all varying levels, but let's be fair, even the best students, even at A-level standard, they're still not going to be able to have like great conversations with you because that's the standard that you're at. Even an A-star student at A-level is, I mean, if I compare myself to what I was at A-level to what I am now, it's worlds apart, right? But I wonder, does that ever kind of dull your love for Spanish? Because now that I love Spanish, but I could never imagine speaking it daily with people who can't speak it. The thing that I love most about it is conversing with Spaniards. And that challenge to try to get to their level and to speak with them and to converse with a Spaniard and feel like there's not a big difference. Does it ever dull your love for the language that you're doing this with 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds who obviously have loads of errors and this, that, and the other?
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, that's one of the things I'm really passionate about Spanish. I mean, I teach French as well, but I'm passionate about languages sort of in general, but obviously Spanish is because of my experience, obviously. And what we're doing sort of now in my department is we're insisting on target language. So obviously target language moderated as you go through the different year groups. So the year 7s have got the typical, puedo quitarme la chaqueta and puedo ir al lavabo, those kind of typical phrases that they have to ask us in Spanish. And then sort of, with them, I always write the date on the board, and so I tell them what the date is, and then after about a few weeks I ask them what the date is and they tell me what the date is. So it's all this, I do believe, sort of the target language actually used in lessons, whereas some, they do feel that to start with they feel very sort of intimidated. And they're not understanding, but they do understand it. And if they don't understand it, somebody else does. And then you do all your mimes and your gestures and you open your book and all the rest of it. And I do believe that is the way forward, and that is the way to get them from an earlier age to to sort of really improve in the communication. It's never going to be the same as when you go, even after sort of doing a university degree in it. It's the
Yeah.
time that you spend in that language, the sort of the complete
Yeah.
and utter sort of being
Immersion.
immersed in that language. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is what happened with me when I lived in Barcelona for all that time. That's
Yeah.
when you just get the nuances, don't you? And the
Yeah.
uh,
It's
which I
all the
think is
little
important.
phrases that I mean, I remember I finished university and I was kind of getting involved in the rat race, and it was like all of my uni friends. Bear in mind, like I'm talking about friends who have studied Spanish at university level. We've all put ourselves into 50K debt for this, and all of them were applying to consultancy jobs in London. And I remember. This was the year after we returned from Erasmus. So it was our final year, and I remember I had to send off an application for, I think it was JP Morgan, whatever. And I mean, won't surprise you, but obviously I was running like late, doing it all last minute, and I was stressing out. And then I just thought, why am I? I was like, I don't even want this job. Like, I want them to turn me down. I just want to know that I sent the application in, because then I'm like kind of competing with my peers. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I was like, right, I'm not doing this. And I was like, right, I'm just going to go to Spain. And I was like, I know it's going to be a bit crap financially speaking. I know that all of my friends now who live in London, they're all on like 30-40K, and I'm struggling to get past 20 in Spain. It is what it is. But I was like, even having done a university degree, I was like, I know I'm fooling myself if I think that I'm even close to fluency. Like, I'm kidding myself on here. And I was like, I know that if I want to be able to tell my kids, because ultimately my whole school career has been geared towards Spanish. I was like, I don't want to be 30 years old or 40 years old and tell my kids, oh yeah, I studied Spanish, and then try and get involved in their homework and be like, oh, what's the subjunctive again? When do you use that? Do you know what I mean? I was like, there was like a shame in me. And I was like, no, I need to learn it, and I need to say that I can speak it fluently. And to do that, I have to move abroad. But I think so many people kid themselves on thinking that they can speak a language. The amount of people that tell me, oh, I'm fluent in this. I mean, I don't even say I'm fluent in Spanish, because I know that there's still loads for me to learn, right? But like, I mean, I remember when I first came over to Spain, I had one of my first meetings with my boss, and he said, he was talking about a client, and then he said, ah, me cago en la leche. And I was like, I shit in the milk. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I was like, I understand it's a negative thing he's saying, but that makes zero sense to me. So then I had to ask one of my friends outside of the meeting. I was like, mate, the boss just said like, me cago en la leche. Like, what does that mean? And then like, she's Spanish. She was trying to give me examples. And I was like, oh, it means like, for fuck's sake, it's that kind of vibe. But that's when we would use it. And then you kind of understand that in Spain, they have tiers to their swear words. So it's me cago en la leche is nice, but then it's like, me cago en la madre que te parió. That's like another level. And then it's like, me cago en tus muertos. And then it's like, right, that's it. That's like, I want to kill you now. Do you know what I mean? And all these like nuanced things that even a university, they're never going to teach you that stuff. I was getting taught Velasquez and Don Quixote and all this. And when have I ever used that since I've come out to Madrid? Never once have I spoken about Don Quixote once.
Why
but that's
not?
what we get taught for 50 grand.
Who do you
It's
hang
not my
around
bag.
with? Who
It's not my bag,
miss.
miss.
You're not sort of like talking about Don Quixote all the time.
Listen, when they started saying that windmills were giants, that's when they lost me. I was like, right, this is going over my head. But yeah, I really think that people they need to understand that, like, you have to. And what Jim, he's moved over to Italy now because he's got an Italian girlfriend. He understands if he wants to learn Italian, he has to immerse himself there. As good as it is to watch YouTube videos in Italian and whatever else, if you're still in Dublin and ultimately when you step out your front door, you're going to speak English. There's only a certain level that you can actually improve. It's a difficult language. Is such a difficult one because it's one of those ones where you just have to constantly. It's not like a bike where people say, "Oh yeah, once you ride a bike, then that's it." It's like, no, you have to stay on the bike. I mean, it's not something that you can do like a module on and then you park it and then you're not going to come back to it ever. It's like I always sort of use the analogy of building a house. So you get your foundations built, and then you just keep building on it. But you've got to have those foundations built properly in order for the rest of the house to be built and to continue building it. And it, language learning. I mean, you say that, you're still learning it. I'm still learning things as well. I'll sort of like listen to stuff, or sometimes my year 13s, they all sort of teach me stuff, and and I think that's what
coming back to sort of the idea of teaching, what by the time you get into sort of the sixth form, particularly year 13, it is it does become more of a two-way process. It rather
Yeah.
than me sort of imparting all my knowledge to you, it's sort of me sort of trying to explain some stuff, you making up your mind. I mean, you from the word go, you were really against the whole Catalan thing. And, when I was trying to sort of teach Catalonia and all the rest of it. And I found that very funny, by the way. And
Okay.
you do realise I just tried to wind you up, don't you?
Yeah, I know.
Just like,
I know.
trying to get a reaction out of you, which obviously I did get reactions, but, the reactions were in Spanish. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
was,
yeah. Ultimately, you got your goal. I'm
yeah.
happy you kind of moved on to the A level students, because I think obviously I had a certain affinity towards you because you're my Spanish teacher and it was my best subject, and I always knew no matter whatever else. I mean, I got good grades in most of my subjects, but Spanish was always there, and I could always fall back on it. And that gave me maybe too much confidence, but it gave me a level of confidence that I enjoyed. But it wasn't the reason I got on with you so well wasn't a case of just because you're my Spanish teacher and I'm good at Spanish, because I had other Spanish teachers. We don't need to name names, but I didn't. Let's just say we weren't best friends. But what I enjoyed about you, from when before A level, to be honest, was that you gave respect when it was earned, and you would even when I was in from year 7 to year 9, you wouldn't talk to us as if we were like these moronic kids and talk down to us in a very kind of authoritative way of, this is how it is, I'm the teacher, you have to listen to me, and that's it. Whereas some teachers that I had, that's how they taught. And I get that everyone has different styles, but for me, for example, that would always rub me up the wrong way. Yeah. And I would always go, oh, if you're going to talk to me like an idiot, then I'll play the fool, and then you're not going to get anything out of me. Whereas if you give me respect, I'll be cheeky because that's who I am, but I'll always give you respect, and you know that I'll put the effort in for you. And I was wondering, is that just your style, or is that like a thing that teachers need to kind of keep in mind, that actually, especially as the kids get older, that you have to kind of talk to them on a more level playing field?
I don't know. I mean, the days of sort of shouting at students and making them stand against the wall and that kind of thing, those days are over. I mean, that's just not. I mean, I know that from having sort of raised my two girls, that's not the way to sort of talk to young people, because it doesn't really matter how old or how young they are human beings, and they do deserve that kind of respect. And all you're going to do is, if you shout them down, they're just going to get you're just going to ignite something in them which isn't what you want to ignite in them. So I think it's sort of making it, that is my style. I'm very laid back in the classroom. I mean, I can remember, I don't even know if it was your group, but some groups have said, oh, it's like in our lessons, when we come into our lessons, it's very much sort of chatting, getting on with stuff, chatting, having a bit of a laugh and a joke. And I think, there's obviously when you're teaching sort of a group of 30, you've got to have this discipline. But that old adage of never smile before Christmas is just, that's just silly. You need to show to them that you are a human being, that you've got a sense of humor. Just show them where the line is. And obviously that line gets smaller and smaller, I guess, when you sort of as the older the students get. And then by the time they're in sixth form, I mean, you're talking to 17, 18-year-olds. They're mini adults at this stage. And they've got this far, and they do deserve your respect, and they've got a greater sense of humor, and they've grown up a lot, and you can just have, I hate the word, but banter with some of them and all the rest of it. And I think that's the way it needs to be. I mean, teaching is not sort of now where we would stand with our old, although it was at Skeg, wasn't it? It was.
It's great.
In the prize givings, we used to have to wear our university robes.
The gowns.
It's not that now. There's just got to be much more of a two-way process now, I think.
I always found that with me, the more responsibility you gave me, the more I kind of relished that responsibility. So I remember, especially at cars, when I was in sixth form, I did the assembly, if you remember. I spoke in front of
Yeah,
the whole school about the
yeah,
importance of learning languages. I
yeah.
think as the first like
You
head
were,
of languages,
you got
which
that all
which like
started. You did.
yeah, but that's the thing. But that's because obviously I was passionate about languages, but also because you, I think, saw that in me and
Mm,
kind of allowed me to express that rather than just
mm,
being like, look, Seb, this is a really kind of old fashioned school. We're in a rural place. The head of language thing is never going to take off. So don't worry about it. Just concentrate on your grades. You were like, oh, no, I'm all for it. Like, if that's what you want to do, like, obviously you love language as well. So yeah,
mm,
I mean, go ahead. And
mm.
that responsibility and kind of loosening the leash, obviously I would take the mickey sometimes, but like more often than not I would try with you anyway to like kind of live up to that responsibility, because I was like, she's
Mm,
giving it to me for a reason. So when you're asking me to come in and help the year 8s who are struggling in Spanish or French or whatever, for me that was a thing of great pride. I was like, well, she misunderstands that I'm actually really invested in this, and obviously I've got a certain level where I can actually help people.
mm,
And I always kind of thrived under that, whereas I always felt that some of the teachers, they kind of never had the confidence in themselves, I think, to loosen that leash
mm.
and to allow the kids to maybe be a bit more expressive and to take more responsibility. I always feel, especially now that I live in Spain, that in our classes there was a very Spanish atmosphere to it, in the sense that, like you said, it was conversationalist, very relaxed, chilled out, kind
Yeah,
of the Spanish attitude towards things in general, just in life.
yeah, yeah.
Did you realize that you ever were doing that kind of subconsciously, maybe? Or
I just, I mean, obviously, I would plan the lessons, but
yeah.
it's just, I think when it gets to that stage, certainly to sort of A level stage, if something else comes up, and you need to sort of be able to move on and explore that rather than being set in a structured, typical lesson. So, I mean, my lessons
Mm,
then probably were not very, very structured, and we probably didn't do what I'd planned to do, but we'd moved on to other things and we talked about other things. And
yeah.
um, so so yeah, it's I think at that stage you've got to have the confidence in yourself as well. um,
Mm,
so if we would move off onto something else, I would be thinking, right, okay, this is great, we'll move off onto this topic, that's fine, but then I'm going to have to bring them back because I do need to cover this topic with them.
stuff. Yeah.
But you just, if that's what they're interested in, this particular topic at the moment, well then let's go with that. And
Yeah.
but you've got to have the confidence in yourself as a teacher to be able to do that, I think. And you can do it more with sixth form than you can with
Yeah. Of
the lower
course.
groups.
Talking about sixth form, and kind of the responsibility that you gave me, and do you think it's within a teacher's remit to not only obviously kind of teach the subject that they're teaching and make sure the kid gets the best grade possible, but do you think it's also, especially at A level, to kind of nurture them into just good people? And even if, for example, I think you always knew that none of your kids, in my class anyway, apart from me, no one else was going to ever take it at
Mm,
university. But did you ever see it as part of your responsibility, not to parent the kids, so to say, but just to
mm.
give them that extra level of trying to nurture them into good people? Or is it kind of a thing of, no, it's solely about the grades?
No, no, not at all. And we're quite lucky at our school, really, because they sort of say that, on the one hand, they say that the grades aren't the important thing. On the other hand, they say obviously they are.
Yeah.
So, but no, it is. You do sort of, the more sort of time you spend with your students, you do obviously become attached to them, not just as your students, but as sort of young people.
Mm,
And you get to know them. And by the time you've got into sixth form, you've sort of known these students for 7 years, 6 or 7 years. And sometimes, they will, I mean, you can tell when there's something not quite right. And so you'll not sort of go there. You'll just try and you'll leave them alone. You won't like
mhm,
keep asking them questions. You might just say a little, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" and just leave that at that. And they might come and talk to you, they might not come and talk to you. But it is, and more these days, it is becoming a question of the well-being of students as well. You've got to, I mean, we've got a duty of care for our students when they're with us, because we are in loco parentis, aren't we, when they're with us during the day. So you've got this duty of care to them and as well. And, you need to, they can have bad days like we can. And just because they're moody and sullen one day doesn't mean that, they hate you or they hate your subject. Just means they're not particularly, they're not having a good day, just as you may not be having a good day. So it is very much, I think more and more it's becoming a question of just trying to get the students to understand that yes, you are their teacher, and that professional sort of distance will always remain. But on the other hand, you are also a human. You've possibly gone through stuff that they are experiencing, the difficulties of learning, and the sort of everything's on top of me, and I've broken up with my boyfriend, my girlfriend. You've got children yourself as well, which does help. And so, whilst maintaining that professional distance, always making them know that you are open to help them if they need to. You won't you won't ask them questions and like Spanish Inquisition them, but yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because you talk about the kids having bad days, and I'll admit, when I was a kid and I was a student, I didn't really think about the teachers having bad days. But how do you manage that? I mean, at the end of the day, you are human. There will be things at some point in your career, there will have been things that have gone wrong at home, or whatever the case may be, with a family member, this, that, and the other, or maybe the stresses, of work. You might have a class that, for whatever reason, just the talent level isn't there. They're not getting the grades that maybe the headmaster is expecting, which then looks poorly at you, and this, that, and the other. How do you kind of, obviously you can't always, but how do you try to keep that at the door, so that when you walk into the classroom, you try your absolute best to keep that outside and not let it affect, even though obviously, of course, sometimes it will bleed through?
Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I think I'm quite an emotive person. So you can tell on my face straight away if everything's going well, if things aren't going well. And you know what? I will say with my groups, with my year 8 groups, look, I've had a really awful morning this morning, and you can make my day go one way, or you can make it go the other way. I'd like you to make it go this way. I want you to sort of really impress me, and I want you to make me feel happy. And I don't want you to disappoint me and get me into an even worse mood than I already am. And that kind of thing, it's like, it's making them aware that you've had a problem, that you're not particularly happy, and that they can make the difference to whether or not your day is going to end up. They won't, obviously, but you can make them believe that they will. And it's just, the thing is, when you're in the classroom, it's like you're like an actor, really, and you just have to. You just sort of, you're there, you're acting as a teacher. It's one big act, and you've got to try not to let how you're feeling go through. But I mean, inevitably, sometimes it will do, and more with the students that you've got more, sort of more experience with, and the older students, and all the rest of it. And it's just, you just. I mean, I think I've cried in front of a class before. Because somebody's just said something that's hit a nerve, and I've just, welled up and had to walk out. But, then you just, just sort of wipe yourself down and get back onto it.
It's funny. I always think the teachers, the best anyway. I think the best teachers are almost like mini psychiatrists, because I think you have to judge, and the best ones do judge each person on their own
Mm,
merits and on their own personality traits. And I would always remember, like, sometimes you would let me get away with things because, for you would know that you could give me that that tether. But then other things another student would do, and I would do the exact same thing, and then you'd come down on like a house of a ton of bricks on me. I'm like, what? But he just did that. And looking back on it now, I'm like, yeah, but you understood that if I went down that road, or if I did that, it meant something different to, as
mm,
opposed to, I'm not going to name names, but if student X did that, where, do you know what I mean? And I always thought
mm,
that's a real hard card game to play,
mm,
because you have to you're almost kind of like, you're working out the personalities of each student, and then within that allowing some to take liberties where you wouldn't let others, and vice versa. And then the teachers that I had that didn't do that, and they took just a blanket approach of, I'm just going to teach every student exactly the same, which I think on the face of it sounds good,
mm.
but in practice doesn't work at all,
Oh no, you
because
can't
I
have
need
a
different things or whatever,
no, you can't
you
have a
know?
one size fits all at all.
Yeah.
That just doesn't work. It doesn't work anywhere, does it? This blanket approach is not you and you're right. You've got to take sort of each of those students that you've got in your classroom is an individual, and you have to take their individualized approach. So, like for example, I would, knowing that you were very good at speaking, so I would let you, and I would, maybe ask you lots and lots of questions, whereas other students that were maybe quieter, shyer, I would sort of I wouldn't be asking them questions the whole time. I would sort of differentiate the style of questions that I was asking them so that it would be easier for
Mm,
them to answer, with maybe not as, I wouldn't ask them for sort of the justifications that I'd ask you for.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah,
yeah,
you have to know your students. You have to know your
yeah,
students, and you've got to react to the way in which they are sort of showing to you what they can or they feel they can't do.
mm.
I think.
And then it's interesting because, I mean, obviously you've taught your daughter A level. Is that correct? You
Mm,
haven't taught her before,
yeah,
but you taught her A level.
yeah.
And obviously, she's she's half Catalan. She's obviously got the lingo from her family. Obviously, you're her mother. She's coming into it. She's obviously going to be better than anyone in the class. And look, she's your daughter, so at the end of the day, she's going to be your favorite. That's just how it is. I would like to think, you might crush my dreams here, miss, but I would like to think that I was your favorite in class when I was your student. And
You were.
I always wondered. Thank you very much. I always wondered how, because you always hear like teachers, oh no, I don't have, it's like they're like my kids. How could I have a favorite child? It's like, that is so much horse shit. It's
Mm,
unbelievable, because you can see it. Sometimes less, sometimes more, but you can see it, and there's obvious reasons why one child would be a preferred kid, because either they do really well, or maybe might not academically do well, but they're just
mm,
really conscientious learners, and they're just good. Louisa, I always think of, like, she wasn't the best at Spanish, but she never took the piss. She was
no.
always a great student. She would always listen. She
Mm,
never acted out. Whereas
no.
me, for example, I was maybe better than academically, but I could have my moments.
Mm.
How do you balance that and like understand that, student X is your favorite, but not, or on the reverse, that student X is detestable, and you're like, oh my god, I've got this guy again. How do you balance that and try your absolute best to keep it as neutral as possible?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think for a start, I don't think ever I've had a student that I mean, I don't think as a sort of a professional that I can ever say, oh, I absolutely detest this student. I detest,
Right.
despise, whatever, because they're kids. They're just like
Yeah.
young kids. They're growing up, and sort of the majority of them, they won't, however badly behaved they are, or whatever, they'll hopefully, after they've gone through the education process and they've learned stuff, they hopefully won't, the majority of ours won't end up sort of, their direction will change.
Hmm.
So there aren't any. I mean, I have got favourites, but I would never make nobody, certainly in lower school, would ever be aware of that. And I just think
Mm.
I'm thinking at the moment about my year 11 group. Yes, I've got some, really, really good kids, really a couple who are absolutely fantastic. And you'd think that they would be my favourites, but actually they're not.
Mm.
My favourites are the ones that I can see they're struggling and they're trying and they're really wanting to do something to please me, and
Yeah.
I can have a bit of a banter with them, because these are the ones that are fantastic. You can't have really banter with them,
Yeah.
but these ones you can. And this one, you've seen how much he's changed since year 11 and the process that he's gone through. But when you're actually, that's in my head, so that's favorites in my
Hmm.
head. It's
Yeah.
the kind of, I guess, the kind of thing you'd say, oh, I think to myself, oh, I'd really like one of my daughters to bring you home, type of thing.
Right.
I
Got
could
you.
really
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah.
But when you're actually in the classroom, you can't do that. There's absolutely no way
Yeah.
you can do that.
How was it when you taught Anna? Because that's a completely different thing. I mean,
Oh,
that's your
that's
daughter,
horrible. It
and
was horrible.
I always was it. Yeah. What
Yeah,
was horrible about it?
because she, and then there were sort of like 2 or 3 of her friends, I think, who obviously they'd been around to my house and all the rest of it, and so I think they thought they had a bit
Mm.
of carte blanche in the lesson.
Right.
And I felt I really sort of came down hard on Anna. I came down on her
Yeah, I can imagine.
harder than I
Yeah.
probably would have done if she hadn't
She was
been
a
my
good kid.
daughter. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't think we ever brought it home
Well,
about
that's good.
the, sort of what went on in the lesson and stuff. But I do know that I was harder on her. I made them, because they would always faff about with their phones. I confiscated their phones every lesson. And this was
Mm.
like my daughter. I was sixth former. I was confiscating her and her friend's phone. I didn't do it for
Mm.
everybody, just her and a friend and somebody else. I made them put them on my desk at the beginning of every lesson, because they were just taking the piss at one stage. So
Yeah.
I just thought, right, okay, well, there you go.
Yeah.
And maybe I should have done it with the whole group, but they weren't taking the piss, so I just did it with these 3.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I when I found out that she was going to be in your class, I was like, oh, that would be interesting, because I can only imagine, like, if it were my dad, for example, who were my teacher, I'd actually dread it, because I
Yeah,
know he would just come down on me,
yeah,
like the smallest thing he would
yeah,
come to, almost to overcompensate, to show, like, look, I know she's my daughter, but I'm not going to give her any
yeah,
favoritism.
yeah,
I'm actually going to
exactly.
go overboard and
Yeah,
go over the top almost, which is
yeah,
a hard. And then I imagine that Anna was probably the best in the class as well. So
yeah,
she would have had that, not only because she's your daughter, but then she's like, listen, miss or mum, like, don't, do you know what I mean? Like, let's be fair, have a go. That's how I always felt.
yeah,
Bit cocky, but I always felt like,
yeah,
you're having a go at me when, like, all of these are getting C's and I'm
yeah,
going to come out with an A. Like,
yeah,
calm down. Do you know what I mean? That was
yeah,
always
yeah,
my tact. So
yeah,
when she's then your daughter, it's like an added level of that confidence,
yeah.
I
It
guess.
it was, and I'm sure she hated it as well. But
Yeah.
and also she went. I can't remember how many were in that group. I think it might have been about 8 of them. But sort of, she was really, really close friends. There was about a group of 5 of them that were really close friends, and they would just be, coming around to my house at the weekend, getting, having parties and stuff,
Yeah.
uh, and then, and I'd seen them in sort of situations that a teacher shouldn't see her students in, type of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I'm sure she absolutely hated it and preferred going to St George's to have the lessons. But
She's probably the only kid who could say that. I think everyone
hey.
else massively preferred to stay at cars. But yeah, it's one of those ones. Do you what's some of the hardest things? What's the hardest aspect of your profession? Is it living up to like school expectations of, right, I don't know how it works, but does the headmaster say to you, we need a certain level of A to B grades in this year group or whatever? Or is it managing the different personalities, trying to inspire kids? Well, what is the hardest part about being a teacher?
Do you know, there isn't a hardest part? It's all It's all really hard. And it gets harder and harder. Um,
Mm,
yeah, I mean, obviously you've got uh, sort of the accountability as
yeah,
far as the exams go, which, you know, I I don't agree with. I agree with the fact that you have to be accountable for the way in which you can teach and for the way what you can do to try and sort of improve students. But at the end of the day, um, they're the ones sitting the exam. And if they
yeah,
don't study, then you can have done absolutely everything you want to help them, which we tend to do, to
mm,
encourage them, to motivate them, to give them these extra revision classes. If they can't be bothered, then, and that does affect you. That will affect you.
yeah.
I mean, thankfully, our school, it's not sort of pay related, but a lot of schools, it is now
Oh,
become,
really?
yeah, it's
Oh,
always got to be one of our appraisal targets, and inevitably it's a not reached objective, not reached, because
yeah.
we don't set the targets are set with this
Best case
computerized.
scenario, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And they are ridiculous targets, so it's all really hard, Seb, and it's hard. It's been really hard, uh obviously, with lockdown.
yeah,
um we got Teachers got a lot of teacher bashing in the
yeah,
UK. But as soon as lockdown happened, that very first day, I was teaching my classes online. So I was stuck to the computer sort of practically all day. And then anytime I wasn't, I was ringing up my form, because they were in year 8 at the time. So I was ringing up, I was going through all of the kids in my form, ringing them up, checking out how they were. And start off with, it was all great and hunky-dory, and it was all a big novelty. And then students stopped coming to lessons, and so you'd have to chase
yeah,
them up. And then you'd have phone calls from parents in your form who were, mothers and fathers, crying over the
mm,
phone because so and so was just not coping. And I mean,
mm,
one evening I went round at, one of the boys in my form that lives on the estate. I went round to his at 7 p.m. To talk to him and his mum, because she just phoned me up in floods of tears because she couldn't deal with him. Um, and that's what we were, that more and more there's sort of a lot of mental health issues, sort of with young children. And it's going to
yeah,
be there are going to be more and more as a result of, sort of lockdown and COVID-19 and all the rest of it. And
yeah.
it's all really, really difficult. It's really difficult.
I think I don't know how you felt, but I think from the outsider's point of view, one thing that COVID has done to help teachers, I think it's kind of re-established their importance. From what when I've been speaking to people who have kids, for example, and they said, "Oh, my admiration for those
Oh
teachers
yeah.
has gone through the roof." Because
Yeah.
I just don't know how. I mean, and they're saying this is my child. I mean, this is
Mm,
literally my daughter or son who I love more than anything in the world. And
yeah.
I don't know how they do this with 30 basically
Yeah.
strangers. They're not your kids. And you
No.
do that day in, day out. And I think people definitely took it for granted that, we always talk about, well, I say we always talk about nurses, but I don't think we give them enough kudos. And again, I think COVID
Mm,
has reestablished their respect, but we
mm,
always kind of lump doctors, nurses, policemen, firemen into the same thing.
yeah.
And I always think that teachers should be lumped in there as well.
Mm.
And I think, I don't know how you feel, but do you feel like you've got more respect because of the situation and now parents understand what it is that you do every day?
Yeah, possibly. Um, yeah, and I mean, a lot of the parents that I spoke to were saying, "God, I don't know how you." In fact, one one day I was doing a year 8 lesson, and so it was a year 8
Mhm.
lesson over online, and there was the year 8s. They were no, they were year 7s at the time. They very immature and very silly, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And so there were a couple of boys on there who were, just wanting to sort of play up to the rest of the group that were there on, on the cameras and all the rest of it. And they were quite disruptive. And so it was, a question of, having to sort of get them in line and all the rest of it, and move on with the rest of the group and move on with what I was trying to teach. Anyway, what I didn't realise was that there was a mother with one of her children who was in my class. She was sitting next to him to sort of try and help, and helping him with his Spanish. Thank God I didn't say anything that I shouldn't have said.
Yeah.
But she emailed me afterwards and she said, look, she said, I just take my hat off to you. You've dealt with that group of 30, and there were a couple of them who were, not playing ball, and you've managed to deal with them, keep the lesson going. And I can't do it with my own child, she said. And you've
Yeah.
managed to do it. I don't know how you kept, that's it. I think she said, I don't know how you kept your calm. So, it's all, you've just got to keep in your head that professional ship
Yeah.
at all times, especially when you're with the little ones. But,
Yeah.
I don't know,
It must be such
take
a
it as it
hard
comes.
balance, because I feel like, with teachers, it was one of the few professions where, like you said, you've got that professional chip and you have to maintain some professional distance, but you have to relate and you have to be personable and you have to show your human side and show that you see the student's human side. And obviously maybe that can grow as the kids get older and you can have more kind of introspective conversations and whatever it may be. But, most people, they go to work and it's right, let me put my professional hat on. You go to the office and it's purely professional. There's no need to maintain this kind of human aspect. And maybe that's lacking in workplaces, but it's not expected. Whereas as a teacher, you have to have both hats on at the same time and balance it. And with some students, maybe I be more professional, so to speak, or colder or more distant, and with others be more warm and more motherly, I guess, to bring the best out of them.
Yeah. That's actually funny you should say that, because I went for I went for one of the assistant head jobs at Cars a few years. You'd left, I think. So I went for this interview, and as they do, they have the student panel interviewing you as well. And so they sort of said they wanted me to they wanted us to do a presentation on what we thought the role of assistant head was about. Anyway, so I did this presentation, and they actually their comment, the student panel's comment, was that I came across as very motherly.
Yeah.
So,
but was that negative or in a negative way or positively?
I think it was positive for me, as far as my personality goes, but I think sort of negative in as much as I think they felt that an assistant head had to be harder, had to be sort of less of a motherly figure, less of a sort of fatherly figure, and needed to be sort of colder almost.
Yeah, I guess it's, at the end of the day, it's horses for courses, isn't it? I mean, people will they will react differently to different teaching styles to different people at the end of the day. But I never thought of you as like, you hear people say like, oh, he was like my second father, like my second mother. I wouldn't go that far, but I definitely thought of you as like a motherly figure, in the sense of, when I would have free like for a free hour at school, because maybe I didn't have a lesson, I'd often just come into yours for a chat.
Yeah.
If you didn't have a lesson, to see how you are, how's things, like blah blah, just have a general chin wag. And I wouldn't do that with a lot of other teachers, not because I didn't like them, but because I didn't have that personal aspect. There wasn't that level of relationship with them. Whereas with you, I always felt that. And I mean, I've had my mental health troubles after I left Cars, but had the things that happened to me afterwards happened to me during school, I would have felt more than comfortable and probably would have come to you in some sort of solace.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have done that with other teachers who are quote unquote colder or whatever, more distant,
Yeah.
I mean,
it doesn't happen it doesn't happen all the time. It's like it's just sort of, you just sort of click with some people, don't you? And it doesn't matter sort of the professional distance, and it doesn't matter the age distance. Sometimes there are students there that just click with you, and you can see so much potential in them, and it just sort of is an automatic thing almost.
Yeah. I wonder because I have a lot of friends when I first came to Spain and it was hard to get a job and this, that, and the other. A lot of people are like, oh, why don't you just teach English? Like, I mean, obviously, you know what it is to learn a language. You've got good at learning a language, and surely you would make a great teacher. And I was like, you wouldn't understand how terrible of a teacher I am, because if you don't get things how I understand them after the first or second time, I just lose my rag.
Yeah.
And I've inherited that from my dad for sure. But do you think it's a calling? Because people always talk about nursing and doctors, and again, firemen, policemen, how it's like a calling. And I think to be a teacher, you have to. I used to think, I'll be honest here, I used to think that teachers were a failure in their subject. And so then they became a teacher. So when there was like my business teacher, I was always like, well, if he was a good businessman, he wouldn't be a teacher, would he?
Yeah.
He'd be a multi-millionaire businessman. Why? I don't think Alan Sugar wants to teach. But the more and more I've got friends now who've gone into teaching and they're doing their courses and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh, they're not doing it because of the holiday or whatever. And obviously the money's not necessarily great. They're not doing it for that. There's a calling, and they just love teaching people, which I've never understood. Obviously, it's not my calling. But do you think it is?
I didn't go into teaching as a calling. No, it was the furthest thing from my mind. My mum was a teacher and my auntie was a teacher, and it was just like, I'm never going to be a teacher. So I finished uni and didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, and that's when I went off to Barcelona. Allegedly, I was going for a year or two, and I stayed for 10 years. I started teaching English as a foreign language, but it was different because I was teaching to adults, and sort of after we'd finished lessons, we'd all go out on the piss and all the rest of it. So they were paying for it, so there was, they were really keen, and they became your friends as well, and it was part of my social life. So I didn't really see that as proper teaching. And then both mine and Albert's job started getting a bit sort of iffy. His had been taken over, and they were starting to get rid of the originals from the original company and replacing them because they were too expensive. And the place that I was working was starting to have some problems as well. So we basically said, well, what should we do? Should we jump, or should we just wait to be pushed? And at that time, they were offering quite big, nothing in comparison to what it is now, but they were offering quite big bucks to go in to teach shortage subjects, and MFL was one of the shortage subjects. So I sort of said, well, why don't I do that? Why don't we just do this? Because, it means, I'll get this pension, I'll get this, I'll get the other, I'll get this pay, I'll get holidays, blah, blah. Okay, so we left, and that's why we came back. And I did my PGCE. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. Had sort of so many moments when I could have just thrown in time, because at that stage as well, I had a 3-year-old as well, and could have thrown in the towel at any time. Then I got my first job in a school the other side of Boston.
For anyone who doesn't know, Boston, I mean, Louise is from there, bless her. But when I have to go and visit her family, who they always tell me they live in Freeston, not Boston, as if there's any difference. But I mean, I love her family to bits, but God, getting that bus up there, it does things to my soul when I have to take that journey. Honestly, it does.
Yeah.
Especially even more now that I'm coming from Madrid to Boston. Oh God, it's like I'm having to pay some sort of penance for some sins of a past life.
There are some as you get further and further into the fens as well. There are some quite tough places, and the school that I was at was quite far into the fence. Anyway, so I did my NQT year, my sort of practice first year there. I'd qualified, but so it was my first year there, newly qualified teacher, that's what it is. And it was absolutely awful. I hated every minute. I mean, I'm talking 2 girls in my form when they were in sort of year 9 or year 8, I think it might have been,
Hmm.
coming to me to tell me they thought one of them was pregnant, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't
Just
know
not
what to
prepared.
do. I don't know what to do with this. And
Yeah.
kids climbing out of windows and coming up to the board and banging their heads against the board. And I was
Jeez.
just like this newly qualified teacher. Anyway, long story short, I left there, and got a job at Horncastle Grammar. And that was where I really started to enjoy it. It was
Mm.
students that really wanted to be there. And then it just went on from there. Skeg Grammar was a different kind of grammar school, and there were some sort of quite challenging
Characters.
characters there. Yeah,
Yeah.
um, like, but they
Some
were.
people would have been
But
my good
I
friend.
really, yeah. I was just trying to think of who they might have been, but
Yeah, I think I can remember, but yeah.
um, did you know that one of them did a Mooney at me?
No.
He was out.
No.
Oh,
But yeah, in the playground, I can imagine. I mean,
yeah,
listen, I was part of shenanigans that went on there.
yeah,
I managed to keep my grades good, so I
yeah.
got away with more things than they did. But yeah,
But they were nice kids. They were nice kids, and I
yeah,
knew they weren't gonna, sort of ever do anything with languages. But they were nice kids. And I and I had to deal with some stuff there. I had to deal with somebody in my form who was self-harming. Um, I had to deal with somebody else whose one of their parents died, and that was sort of,
mm,
and that makes you really think, and that's so from Horncastle through to, well, where I am now, apart from the blip that I had. But the blip that I had was nothing to do with teaching per se. And I love
yeah,
teaching. I love
mm,
standing in front of a class. You give me a class of 800, 1,000 kids, and I wouldn't have a problem whatsoever. Um, I absolutely love that side of the teaching, and trying to bring out the potential and recognizing the potential in every individual.
hmm,
And it's the rest of the bollocks really
yeah.
that I can't deal with.
Yeah, no, I understand. Before we finish up, you kind of touched on it just at the end there. The positive of it, the bringing a kid to their full potential, or leading them on a path that will eventually lead to them
Mm.
having a really great life and whatever. How does that feel for you? Is that just vindication for everything, or like you said, all of the crap that you have to deal with, all the paperwork and all the bureaucracy of it all? When you get that one kid or two kids per class or even per year, whatever it may be, does that vindicate everything else? Does that make it all worthwhile?
Yeah, and it's not just those that will go on to do Spanish for A level or Spanish at university or anything like that. It's just when you've worked so hard, whether it's sort of on a academic level,
Hmm.
insofar as you've opened up their mind to diversity, you've opened up their mind to cultural differences, you've opened up their minds to actually, yes, they can do this. And it's not sort of just because their parents were that. I mean, that is, if I had £1 for every time a parent would come to me at parents' evening saying, oh yeah, well, I was always rubbish at French or German or whatever it was. I mean, I'd
Yeah,
be a millionaire. And
yeah,
that, obviously, that attitude or that sort of way of thinking, it does rub off on you, on your children. And the fact that you can then, sort of somebody, like, for example, we were talking about
hmm,
one of the boys in the group,
yeah,
yeah, in our A level group, and
yeah,
he came. I think he started the school in year 10. First thing he said to me when he was in the very first lesson was, "Oh, I'm really rubbish at Spanish, and I'm not going to get anywhere with it."
hmm,
And as we worked through, it was obviously sort of, he'd had sort of, maybe, I don't know, bad teaching or a bad experience in his previous school and all the rest of it. We worked through. He ended up getting an A star. He ended up doing it for A level, and he got an A. Did he, or did he get an A star? I can't remember. an A
I
or
don't
an A
think
star anyway.
yeah, thereabouts, yeah.
And this was the person that at the beginning of year 10 had said to me, I'm rubbish, I shouldn't really be doing this subject. And, is that is part and parcel of it. And it's not just that, it's the being able to, if somebody says, oh, that they're really interested, they really want to do this, and sort of helping them out and thinking, well, okay, so you want to go and be an engineer. So don't go and do an engineering diploma in A level, go and do physics and maths, and just trying to sort of show them the different options, show the students the different options that there are available to them. This world is huge and there's so much possibility for them to do. And that's what I like about my job,
Mm,
just being able to help them
yeah.
any way
Well,
I
I
can.
mean, I know that obviously I speak to Louisa every now and again, and even though she dropped Spanish and everything else, she still looks back fondly on your lessons, even though she always struggled with Spanish and never felt confident in it. She always enjoyed
Mhm.
your lessons. And I said at the start of the podcast how much of an influence you've had indirectly and directly in my life. So, I mean, yeah, you've definitely done your job well there. Before we get going, there's just two more questions I want to ask. The first of is who helps the helper? So when you're feeling down, when you've got going through a tumultuous time at home or with the stresses of the job or whatever the case may be, who helps the teacher then? Is it the sanctity of the teacher's room, the where you all kind of, do you know what I mean, you're all helping each other out, or is it you're at home, friends? Who helps the helper?
What, apart from the bottle of wine?
Apart from the bottle of wine, apart from that lovely Rioja.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, we don't have the staff room now at the moment, so
Of course, yeah.
so that's not. I mean, before, yeah, if you'd had sort of like a bad lesson or a bad do with a student, you could go and into the staff room, and chances are other people would have had a bad session with this student as well. But who helps the helper? I think I don't. I've got two very, very close friends who are both teachers. One's not at my school, one is, and I will. And then actually, there's another one she's not a teacher. She's the exams officer,
Mm,
and I will go to them and I will sort of talk to them and get their, and they'll really help me. Um, you I do go and talk to my mum and dad about a lot of things, but I think if you're not actually in that environment,
yeah.
it's very difficult to be able to understand it completely. And some people just can't understand it at all. They just have no
Mm,
knowledge, no interest, no. So yeah, there's a couple of people, two or three people that I would go to, and
well, yeah, it's good to know that you have that there are some people there, because I think, like we said before, I think people kind of just took it for granted, the teacher's job, and then I think now with COVID have now understand a bit more, have at least a bit more empathy and compassion towards the pressures that go on and that are involved in being a teacher. With that said, the final question: how do you keep on top of your mental health? What do you do to keep that in top shape?
well, I didn't, because I did have a bit of a blip. I mean,
Yeah,
it wasn't all to do with school. There were lots of things going
no,
on, but I mean, school was definitely one of them. And I went through a really bad time for about 8 months. And I thought I had help. The school were really good, actually. The school paid for me to have sessions with a therapist.
mm-hmm.
And sort of the work related people that help you as well, and so they were really, really good. And again, these friends were really good, and a bit of medication.
Mm-hmm.
um, and you just take one day at a time, really. I
Yeah,
just take one day at a time. If
mm-hmm.
I am having a problem, like the other day, and it was on holiday, I was on half term, And the other day, I just could not be bothered to get out of bed. I couldn't be bothered.
Mm.
But then spoke to one of my friends, and she said, "Come on, let's go out for a walk." Blah 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 blah. So it's I do need to. I need to have people around me. I don't like
Yeah.
being on my own.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
the same.
yeah, I need to
I'm the
have
same.
somebody there to boost me really. So
Yeah,
I'm doing. I'm managing really really well now.
that's good to hear.
Yeah, so I'm doing
That's good
really
to hear.
well.
That's
Mm.
good to hear. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation. It's something, like I said, I've been away from school now for 6 years, but I
6 years.
still, I know, I still send you messages every now and again. Probably
Yeah.
annoy you sometimes,
No,
but
you don't. And I'm still got pending, even though it goes against the grain, to come and visit Madrid.
listen, when I show you around Madrid, you will think of all that time wasted in Barcelona, and then you'll say, "Oh, if only I could live my life again. How differently would I do things?"
Yeah.
And then
No,
maybe
I'd
at
love
a
to go
maybe
actually.
maybe at A level you'll start teaching about like Madrid independence instead of Catalan independence, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
on. But no, thank you so much for having this conversation. I really appreciate it.
yeah, no worries.
Hi guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. Every review helps us climb the podcast charts so that even more of you can listen to our amazing guests. We really appreciate the support. Remember to tune in next week, but until then, keep safe and have a good one.